life. I'm sorry, we have bells going off here. I apologize for that. Where is that coming from?
No worries about the bells.
Uh,
We're not, I don't think we're hearing them here. They might be in your background.
yeah,
This is,
Zoom does a good job of eliminating background sounds.
it does. It's got nice filters.
Yeah.
This is the Open Global Mind weekly call on Thursday, September 25th, 2025. Um, Gil was just reporting in on the many different Zoom meeting assistants he's been trying out and a bit of an addiction and how he had withdrawal from getting off Facebook just recently. And I was reminded of the scene in French Connection Part 2, I think, where the French mafia addicts Popeye Doyle to heroin and then he has to go cold turkey. And I think I remember a really good scene. I was young. I was a little young for an R-rated movie back then, but I remember a scene where he goes through withdrawal, and it was my first exposure to like what happens that way.
And I don't remember that at all. All I remember from that movie is the car chase under the elevated trains.
Yep. Which
Sorry,
apparently
Jerry, just
they didn't have a lot of clearance to do that. It's the story I think is that they just kind of winged it.
sorry, Jerry, just for posterity and because we're recording this, just to clarify, that was the first time you said you realized what cold turkey was, one of the many you've been through. Is that what you suggested?
Yeah,
The
I
joke,
did
by the
not.
way.
I did not suggest that, but yeah.
By the way, if I disappear, we've had two power cuts in the last hour or so. So if I disappear, it's not because of something you've said or anyone said. It's because we had a power cut.
So are
Strange
the
new
authorities?
world, strange new world of ours. 2.5 years, I saw someone working on a local substation. Asked him what he was doing. He said they were joining up extra paths of power into the substation. So if one path cuts out, there's another one kicks in straight away. We've had plenty of power cuts since then. Whatever the
Power cut.
whatever the
Power
system
cuts.
is, yeah, whatever the system is, it doesn't work. Or
So
not
clearly
efficient.
an improvement.
Well, they spent money, economy worked, people got shares, shareholdings or whatever.
Yep.
System kicks on, moves on.
Cool. Stacy, I am reading your email, and I think it's a nice idea about the topic. I can either read what you just said, or you can explain what you said. Which do you prefer?
Well, if you understood it from reading it, I trust they will understand it.
Cool. I think I'll just read it in a sec. Um, where is everybody? Is there enough going on in the world for you? Yeah, kind of crazy times. Let's dive into the topic, and I'll read Stacy's note to the Open Global Mind list, which is, hi gang, for the topic of abundance, I'd like to request trying out a simple speed round exercise. Before going into our usual rounds of conversation, I propose that we each say in a few words, think of it as a title, phrase, headline, bumper sticker, whatever you want to call it, that only answers the what it is. Refrain from adding the how, where, when, and why. Just what abundance is, I think you're saying.
Yes.
At least for this quick round. Anyone can choose to say pass. Thank you for consideration. At least you didn't say thank you for attention to this matter, which is how Trump ends many of his incredible Truth Social posts, which is, of course, the source of news these days. That's how policy's made.
Which is why the wink was there, to make sure that you made that connection between attention and consideration and the parallel between what I was saying and what Trump was saying. So there's a reason for that wink.
Very nice. Very nice. There's a wink and also hearts. So love that.
I thought that hearts were obvious.
Beautiful. That sounds great. So why don't we make a little circle of the room and see just the what, not the how, why, what, not the explanatory stuff, and just a short phrase. It's our quick round robin. So don't go way deep, but think about what abundance is. And I think I'll just ask for volunteers, whoever would like to go. Stacy, why don't you go first?
Because I thought about it.
Love that.
Abundance for me is having what you need when you need it.
Are we done? Is that good for everybody?
Sure, yeah. That's the point. We can add later.
I'll go.
Please.
Jerry, I like your manner of asking for all volunteers. That's excellent. I immediately thought of the passage in Pirkei Avot, the wisdom of the father, wisdom of the ancestors, said, "Who is rich? The person who is content with their lot."
Content with their lot.
Content.
Content, yes. What I thought I said.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gil. Who's next? Everybody's being so pithy and like right on mission here. I'm a little like, it's early. How'd that happen?
I'll go. Hi, Jerry. Hi,
Hi,
everyone.
Jesse.
Hi. I'm gonna say Ikigai.
Ikigai. So the overlapping diagram of
Do
what
what
you
you love, do what you are good at, do what the world needs, and do what you can get paid for.
There we go. Thank you. Who else would like to go?
I'll say
Abundance.
pass, by the way. I'll just pass on that one. I'll just
Alex passes. Excellent. Pete, Rick, Doug, Klaus,
I
me.
have an oblique contribution. Love is all you need.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I would frame it along the same lines as skill did. Abundance is to be at peace with, what with the gifts you have been given.
For me, I think infinite possibility.
Infinite possibility. Love that. John, you've come into, we're doing a very quick round on what abundance means. What do we think abundance is in like a phrase or sentence or bumper sticker? And we're 2/3 the way through the group. So if you'd like to jump in, that's good. I'm going to be slightly controversial and I'm going to say abundance is more than enough.
That's a good answer.
Who else would like to jump in?
Well, I apologize for being late, but I'll roll with what you said, Jerry. More than enough is a good way to frame it.
Thank you. Rick, Klaus?
Klaus went. We just
Oh,
waiting.
that's right. That's right. Klaus went. Rick, can you hear us? Come in, Rick. Come in, Rick.
Oh, yes, yeah. I'm just co-intelligence.
Abundance is co-intelligence. All right. Thank you.
Everybody.
Yeah, that worked well. Thanks, Stacy. So Pete has a whole new avatar picture for his. I was like, oh wait, this is new. It's like when we change our hairdo. Like, what happened? Wait. So I'm really interested in the contrast because back in the day, Diamandis and Kotler wrote abundance, and they kind of meant we now have the capacity to make between nanotech and endless energy and all these sort of. It was a techno-optimist manifesto of sorts, and it comes from a place of oh my gosh, like we could just overwhelm all these places where there is scarcity with technology. And it's a little light on the barriers and between belief systems and regulations and politics and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty light on that. I've not read either of these books in full, but it was very much in the techno-optimist vein. Then very recently, Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson wrote Abundance, which I think doesn't have a subtitle, which has become a piece of the democratic movement and was saying, hey, one of the things that's preventing us from getting abundance on things like housing and other social goods is overregulation and constraints. And some people are critiquing this view as being kind of neoliberal. It's very much let's get the government, let's get regs out of the way so that we can generate abundance for everybody, which is possible if we sort of let people get things built and done. The book, I think, has a very nice critique of progressives and liberals who have layered in so many regs that it's hard to do things. I have a friend who's in commercial real estate here in Portland, and you only need to like glance at this topic, and he will regale you with stories about why it's so difficult to get things built or done here in Portland. And then I've got a point of view on abundance that I'll just put in the room, which is that humans who know how to live in community on the commons create abundance in many ways together, and that it requires trust to do so. And so I created a little formula that I like, scarcity equals abundance minus trust, which is not about either of the things that I just mentioned, the other two approaches from the other two books. It's more that in places around the world, we used to know how to create abundance, and we didn't have to worry. People could be happy and well-fed and live well. And in some cases, Aboriginal cultures in Australia, for example, way before the advent of things like money, the payment of rent for shelter, all those kinds of things. And by raising this, I don't mean we should all abandon our homes and all currency and go back to a nomadic lifestyle. But I do mean that if we can manage to achieve small degrees of cooperation, a little bit like what Rick was saying a moment ago, that we can collectively create abundance much more than we think we can. That abundance is kind of at hand in how we think of resources and stewardship versus ownership and other things like that. Kevin and Kalia and Jose, we just did a little lightning round a moment ago about what we think abundance means. If it was a bumper sticker, kind of a really short phrase, a bumper sticker or sentence, if you'd like to take a swing at that, we'd love to hear what you think abundance means. You can also pass.
Pooled and shared resources with mission-focused local investing.
Cool. Got some specifics there. Kalia?
I really like something that I've heard as sort of a way to get us through the wormhole that we're in, which is abundant enoughness. Like there's a really a significant challenge where people who have a lot are continue to want a lot, and like how do people get into their nervous system like they actually have enough and they don't need to like accumulate more, and they can choose to like co-create community together? Because I'm in a bunch of circles where like people, including this one, people say lots of nice things. Where's our community where some of us are living together? Anyway, so abundant enoughness as a kind of frame that is a sense of being that we can get into, so then that people, those with resources, are actually aligning and and also how are those people with resources like asking deeper questions about why are people hoarding? Well, they're hoarding for good reason. So how do we help meet their needs without the need to hoard?
Thanks, Kalia. Jose, did you want to jump in with a short?
To be honest, I'm not sure what abundance means. It seems to be a good catchphrase that we've all picked up and a lot of us are talking about. But I think abundance comes from technology for the most part, whatever technology that means, right? Social technology, physical technology, artifacts. Is that what we mean by it? I don't know. I struggle with really sort of grasping what abundance means in these contexts.
Thank you, Jose. And I'll just add, there's a book from 2010 by Juliet Shore titled Plenitude, The New Economics of True Wealth, which plays with that notion that abundance is too much, that the goal of abundance winds up being a little bit like Peach has posted in the chat about consumer abundance. He writes, the paradox of abundance. We live in a world where we have a practical abundance of many things, food, technology, consumer goods, but overabundance of some, for some people, can cause addiction, affliction, disease, and the abundance isn't well distributed. Many people are starving and without basic needs. Totally agree. And so there's like this mirage that we all desire abundance, and I'm interested in Kalia's hack of the brain of how do we convince more people that when they've got enough, it's good. They're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. More might actually even be damaging in different ways, either to them or their family or society. We don't know, but clearly society is not very oriented in that way. With that, I will turn to the hands queue and go to Gil.
Yeah. Yeah. Notable to me that until Pete's ad in the chat, none of us was talking about abundance as being lots of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll echo for those who came in later. My comment at the beginning was to reach back to a Jewish wisdom text called Pirkei Avot, the wisdom of the ancestors, that asks, "Who is rich? The person who is content with their lot," which I think is the mood of a lot of the comments that I've heard here. Jerry, your framing had a lot of moving parts in it, but I just want to pick up on the books. I haven't read either of them either. I know that I really need to read Ezra Klein because of where it is in the contemporary dialogue. But I'm really struck by how off the debate over too much regulation versus too little regulation is. We, all of us, depend on it, and there's too much in many places. I mean, I live in Berkeley. I know a little bit about housing regulation being a pain in the ass. But these things happen because people built buildings that fell down on people's heads and were fire traps and et cetera. So, that's part of what the Commons does, is set boundaries of what we do together. And I've had, in my professional work, I've had a bit to do with intelligent regulation, where businesses can actually embrace it because it provides certainty and clarity and not burdensome paperwork barriers to getting things done, but makes things work better. And it's a question of how they're designed and by whom and for what. So it's an example of just, and I don't know if I'm accurately blaming Klein for this. I generally like his work, but I'm surprised by what I hear about this book as being, a kind of, maybe a seriously misframed argument.
Which is part of what I was hoping we would sort of touch in this conversation. Thanks for putting that on the table, Gil.
Mm-hmm.
John.
Yeah, this isn't I'll just say, I'm interested also in the connection, and this goes back to Kalia's comment, is the term affluence, which, has gotten a little bit of a bad association, like with affluenza and that kind of thing. But like, you go back to the origins of affluence, and it's abundant flow. And so I think when you're talking about abundance, it's also important, to think of that verb element of it, the flow of abundance versus the hoarding of abundance, I think, is a real key. And I think it's interesting, how the meanings of words change over time, but with the origin of affluence, there's a fluid flow, element to that. And so the idea in today's culture, where affluence, the mental picture that may come to mind is this hoarding, accrual type of thing, is not what that term was originally, pointing to at all. So I think that's important.
I love that. Thank you, John. And I think abundant flow, the perception of abundant flow, is what causes people to relax and think maybe they don't need to hoard. Seeing that there's more than enough for everybody in whatever the resource is that they're talking about, I think lets people relax. So there's I think a bunch of nuance there about what we perceive to be available, how durable we think it'll be, all that kind of thing. Gil, I think your hand is still up from earlier. So I'll go to Klaus.
Yeah, I think the way we perceive abundance depends very much on our personal position to it, the way we see ourselves in the world around us, because there is no way that physical goods and physical well-being will ever be evenly distributed. There will always be some who have more than others. But both in the New Testament way of thinking, in Buddhism, it's about how you position yourself within the world around you. So the notion of suffering, you cause yourself to suffer by wanting, by wishing to have, and so on. And so I think it's a very unique concept on a very individual level.
And also has really interesting complications on a cultural, societal level around the world. There are lots of, I think, different perceptions of it that only a few of which we're probably aware of in different ways. Jesse, please.
Thanks, Jared. Can you repeat that statement that you said about abundance without trust? Can you repeat that?
Sure. Scarcity equals abundance minus trust, meaning humans knew how to create abundance, but it took trust to do it. So when you squish out the trust in those systems, you get scarcity. And then capitalism, by the way, loves scarcity. I went to business school where they teach you that scarcity equals value. And what they mean partly is that unless there's scarcity, there's no business model. So you better create some scarcity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I never liked that framing at all.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then John's version of without hoarding, it seems like that statement could be used without hoarding as well. And you said something about if you have enough, then maybe there's no tendency to. And I heard this story of a person overseas who was with someone who was panhandling. I don't know the word these days, but and he was in the more poor part of the neighborhood. And he said, he walked by and he's like, why don't you just go up the street in the richer part of the neighborhood? And he's like, oh, I've done that. They don't give as much. And so I'm seeing that people, when you get enough, it's not enough ever. It's like evolutionary. And also I want to bring up the book that was given to me the other day called Pendulum. And it's like every 40 years we go from me to we, and not the me to we that we know of, but a different kind of cooperative version of life that was spoken about to more of individualism. And it's like a system, this just pendulum that's kind of, we're in it, and we're not necessarily everywhere in the world, I guess, but definitely in America. I can see that.
Thank you. Sean, please.
I just want to riff off what Klaus said and what you said, Jerry, about scarcity equals abundance minus trust. In my experience, scarcity can also equal abundance minus awareness. Gave a presentation to a group of agricultural producers up in Walla Walla a year ago, where I went through this whole thing of the hydrographs, the stream flow, the amount of water flowing through the watershed. And I finished my presentation and it was silent. And then this one guy spoke up and said, I don't know that I believe what you just said. And I mean, it's like there was no conjecture or anything in it. It was just all, stream flow gauges and mathematics and whatnot. But it drove home to me, like here I had this pretty clear picture in my mind of the abundance, and these other guys in the room like didn't have that mental picture at all. And I think trust is an issue there, but upstream of trust is like if you're not even aware of the abundance, or as Klaus said, if your perspective, you're seeing the system like you don't have water, then water is scarce. If you have plenty of water, water is abundant. And I agree with that.
Thank you. There's a bunch of interesting interlocking concepts here. Klaus was putting in the chat about tanha and santuti. different concepts, I think, from Sanskrit. And there's also aparigraha, which is non-grasping, so it's similar. And these are all, aparigraha is one of the yamas or abstinences of yoga, of original yoga from Patanjali. Yoga was a mental practice for a long, long, long time before it was a physical practice with asanas. And it has really good advice for living. It's really nicely done. And if more of us paid attention to some of the precepts there, maybe we would have more abundance collectively. I'm also struck with water. There's a name for this, sort of watershed management. There's a different word for it, but working your land with swales and other kinds of things so that you have your land catches and retains more water than industrially farmed land or other kinds of lands do. And that creates an abundance of water on your property. Dave Witzel and his wife Claudia and I visited Jumping Frogs Farms in way above Petaluma many, many years ago. And we were talking to the couple who own the farm, and they said, there was a really bad rainstorm last season, and I was sitting at home reading a book by the fireplace, and I got a call from a neighbor who said, oh my gosh, do you guys need help? And all their neighbors were industrial farmers. And the neighbor was like, oh my gosh, do you need help? We're flooding. We have all kinds of bad things happening. And she described to us how they had a bunch of ponds and a bunch of very absorbent land on their property. Nothing bad was happening to their property because it was equipped to actually soak in really nice rains. And she was not worried. She was busy like enjoying reading a book. So that's a form of abundance. Jesse, can you say a little bit more about pendulum?
Oh, well, the core theory is that there's two extremes that we oscillate from: me periods of like individual, like self-focused, and we periods that are collective and community focused. And this pattern is kind of like a 40-year swing between those extremes. And where like there's a fulcrum of where the early 2000s and the early 60s make opposite ends. And it's kind of reflected in music and art trends. And those societal swings are like just 10-year periods where they behave in predictable ways. And it traces back all the way back 3,000 years. And they kind of say how the East reflects the West 40 years behind kind of thing. So I'm not sure. I haven't like read the whole book, but it was an interesting concept. It seems like it's mathematical, but everything's not predictable and human. But it was an interesting thing to see.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing that. I hadn't heard about the book, and really, it's interesting. How is it? It was written in 2012. How has it not gotten more attention?
Well, I would definitely look at it and see maybe why, but I haven't found it. I didn't go deep enough to figure that
Yeah.
out, but I see that there might be business implications for why successful politicians or entertainers succeed based on the pendulum swing that we're in. Like certain music and certain words, like I'm starting to hear the same kind of music that we did in the 70s right now. And there's like the bell bottoms, we came back, and it was a brief thing, but it just is interesting. It's enough to be like, huh.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a whole class of literature on cyclical theories of history, from the Great Transition to the Fourth Turning to, I don't know, there's like this is a whole class of literature, but this one seems like a really pragmatic explanation. It's like, things here, this is how things swing.
Yeah, and like it's weird that we have this community-centered purpose, like how can I serve, is a very strong book at one point that aligns with that we society. But I don't know, what is Trump? Like it's a very interesting conversation. Thanks for asking.
Love that. Yeah, thanks for bringing the book to our attention. I really appreciate the addition of the conversation. Stacy.
Yeah, so if I can just start from where I am and connect to what a lot of you have said. And Jerry, I think you're spot on with, I know you're spot on with the trust thing, but I want to mention how media and billionaires and the conflicting stories are eroding that trust and how it pertains to now. Kalia put a comment in about the need for housing and free transit. And a lot of the conversations I have are around what's happening in New York City with Mondani. And I just want to read to you one of the comments that I got in my private messages, because it ties into some other things that are happening that have to do with free speech and all the other cultural things that are happening that the media is a big part of. So this is the message I got. You cunt hole Arab lover cunt. Get the fuck out of New York. That scumbag will not be mayor, you cunt. This is just one of many that I get quite
Scott.
frequently. That being said,
Stacy, why do you stay for that?
I'm speaking, excuse me.
Okay.
People get this all the time, and free speech is a very big issue. I know from speaking to people in other states, I know from my friends in Florida that there were tanks that drove by in Black neighborhoods that were meant to intimidate people into not voting. I'm very clear on what's been happening for years, and I'm very clear that nobody's going to shut me up. I was out the other night and a friend came up to me and hugged me and she said, am I going to get put on a list? And she said it half jokingly, but we weren't really joking. Anyway, so I got in a conversation, and my conversations now are mostly local. So I put up a post, and it was about Cat Stevens tickets being $632, because the argument I get from people that are affluent in my community is all the businesses are going to leave New York City if we elect Mondani. I'm sorry, this is my new foster dog, and there's a story behind him too.
Okay.
So I have people that are now defending the billionaires, and they're afraid that the billionaires are going to leave New York City if, heaven forbid, we have affordable housing and free transportation. This gives me an opportunity to speak to them. The gentleman that posted that, I then took his post and publicly put it right up there, because after I looked through his page and saw all of his Jesus quotes, I wanted the community to see who this guy is. I'm not afraid of him. So in answer to your question, Gil, I keep doing it because I know that there are good people on both sides, especially in my community. And I know that there was a lot of manipulation. Very quick, short story that will also answer that, if I may. Well, maybe, I'm going to stop, take care of the dog, and then hopefully I'll get the opportunity to speak again later. Yeah, let me do that. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Kevin.
Yeah, abundance. So I'm doing a thing to create it. I'd like to describe, if I could, for a minute. We lost our house. It's actually in the phrase uninhabitable. We didn't lose it. It could be redone. And 1 in 6 people in my neighborhood, I just want to know, a low status unincorporated neighborhood, lost their houses, highest of anything in the Southeast. And so we're going to do a nonprofit housing fund. And because it's a nonprofit, it means everybody can talk about it. And so, a PTA officer can talk to a volleyball coach about it. And it'll be community directed capital, and the community will get more money back than the affluent people who write big checks. And so we're going to use that to help this low status neighborhood have a seat at the table. And there's starting a Latino business association. Just the population grew by 18%, and it was the cheapest place. So it's a lot of Latino, but there's no codified way for aid groups to write them a check. The restaurant association had an association, and so there was a restaurant employee support fund. But the food trucks and caterers and Latino folks, there was no place to write a check. So they're creating an entity to be at the table, and it matters right now because there are these small area plans being put out, and that's like redesigning this place after the disaster, right? And One of them is the counties, and it's broad and it's messy. But then there's a separate small area plan that's competing to be the story, and it's led by people with the Chamber of Commerce and realtors. And they only do outreach to Latinos, on one occasion or whatever. But obviously, they would cause displacement, right? Because they're motivated for increasing property values, and increasing property values puts the people who are at risk of, because it's a place people already fled to. It's $100,000 less per house than the rest of the county. So more Latino, more Black folks that got pushed away. And so we're going to create a political power using a fund. And then the fund will also have to increase biodiversity, because everybody's house is at risk because the ground got scoured. So we have dead soil, and you need biodiversity to hold the soil to reduce the housing risk. So we can measure the housing success by the health of the river, and then along with the number of people who are housed. So I think it's going to be a real popular story. And we got a whole lot of the partners engaged, and I got the best community organizer says this is a really good plan, and folks who are there's a real credible community group that we're designing it for, called Swananoa Communities Together, and they're the social safety net below everybody else. When you have no rent or utility bill, you go to them, and they're doing about 60,000 a month. They've done that a really good job, and they realize, well, we need to solve housing. 400 people lost their houses, so we're going to start with housing and create biodiversity. So I think it should be pretty fun, and might even include my house. Who knows? So and that should be fun.
Kevin, thank you for describing that. It is just curious, is that activity convincing you to stay closer to Swannanoa? Because I think you've been pulling yourselves away from Swannanoa because it's just been so sad.
Yeah, that's interesting, because we moved to the River Arts District, which is a highly access place. It's where the artists are, and they want to be more like this road in Santa Fe where rich folks come and buy art, and they don't live in the loss of being displaced is not a problem. And so the Chamber of Commerce and the tourism development is all behind the artists who are taking their well-resourced artists taking their future in their hands. And so it's like not much for me to do. And then this came along that somebody reached out and said, could you use some of this neighborhood economic stuff around the problems we're trying to address? They're trying to do food and housing and transportation, but housing is the one that's making everything worse. So we're going to, they lead, they're Latino and biracial and all that. And, we're designing it for this really trusted community entity that has, housing groups around it, mountain housing and habitat and land trust, all kinds of big stakeholder resources around it. But I don't think nobody's ever measured, low-income housing to reducing risk by biodiversity. So I think that's kind of an intriguing question that we want to do both of those things.
I love that. Thanks, Kevin. And then you're making me wonder many things. One of which is, why aren't property and casualty insurance companies all over this? Why aren't they all into sort of the ecological ways to reduce environmental risks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? They should be promoting, funding, explaining, storytelling, everything. And all they're really doing is like calculating stats and then raising rates. Or pulling out of dangerous regions because it's uninsurable. We did what we could. We raised rates as far as we could, and then it's uninsurable. That maybe I'm just not perceiving their efforts.
We have some startups who are doing community embedded insurance. You're not able to make a profit on property now in with climate things. So it needs to be collectively owned, and the return goes back into reducing risk. That model makes sense. Extractive profits, in property insurance is short term, and you need to put it into something that will be there when things go worse. So we're linking in community embedded insurances. People are pooling and sharing the resources together, sharing risk. So and then the community owns the balance sheet.
Yeah. So let me pull on one more thing you said, which is it seems like terrible climate events are making places uninsurable or uninvestable as real estate, which is driving the collective, not collectivization, but community land
Yep.
trust.
Yep.
Basically, the restructuring of ownership or stewardship of land, which is a
Yeah.
good thing.
The one session I'm moderating is the one that puts all weird stuff together. It's collective purchasing, and it's the library of things from Shareable, and it's a real grassroots crowdfunding. And so what if you just pooled and shared your resources, but then you found a way for the community to invest alongside your pooling and sharing? I mean, nobody's done that. And that would be a really easy, too adhesive approach. We're looking for some of these things that you could launch together, where if you launch one, it helps the other. And some of those things are happening. There is infrastructure coming, and so.
Thank you. That was great. Really, super. I love what you're working on. Stacy,
I think it
please.
should be fun.
Yeah.
I have a very cynical, conspiratorial answer to your question about insurance companies. And that is that I do believe they want people to lose their properties so that they can be bought up. Very simple.
Yeah, I can smell the cynicism on that one. Thanks, Stacy. Pete?
I wanted to chime in with some thoughts about that answer too. As Stacey, I really like yours, and I think that happens certainly. I think there's also a structural thing in the way that we run our economy and hierarchical corporate entities and their decision making. I think it's easy for people on the ground to see a situation and go, there's a thoughtful, system-friendly approach to making the situation better. But when you report to somebody, it goes up to the boardroom and the upper management, and they don't have that same nuance of decision making. So I think we see over and over big hierarchical corporate structures make really dumb decisions, not because it's the best kind of decision to make, but we've rewarded the creation of these big dumb hierarchical things that are theoretically kind of easy to manage and just accrete size. So of course they make dumb decisions instead of thoughtful, systems-friendly approaches to situations on the ground.
Thank you. I would love to hear from foresighted business folks who are doing the opposite somewhere. That would be great. It would be a joy to my heart to have people jump into this conversation. We're like, no, we had this initiative, we did this thing. Look, it's all over the place, but I'm not seeing it yet. Jesse.
Well, I'm working on one.
Excellent.
Talking with the city of Seattle. I'm talking with cooperatives, and we're starting to visualize place-based resources, not just talent, but also goods and services, so we can match them and start. I realize that when we start visualizing these resources, you can start seeing the gaps that Stacy starts seeing. When you verbalize that, that's one thing, but when you can visualize the dumb decisions and start looking at data-informed decisions, visualization really helps. So Kevin, I have lots of people who are Stand for Housing. It doesn't sound like you have an actual, you have everyone you need at the table for housing. But as we move away from conceptual definitions of abundance to meeting people's needs in a specific place-based community, I sincerely believe that visualization of talents and goods and services supports the needs of that community. And I would love to support and talk with you because when we're working with land trusts, that's a perfect example of utilizing the fingers of the people that they're working with. And so I'll put the mapping project we're putting down.
I would love to talk to you about that. I've done some pretty serious mapping. I was telling this story. If I can tell you a brief mapping story, it's kind of interesting, I think. I was working with Mark Beam, as some of you know, and Gary Bowles, and we were mapping the distribution of malaria nets in Uganda linked to the Global Fund on AIDS and, you know, et cetera. And we were able to show that the nets were going to where Musveni's cronies were, as opposed to where the malaria area. There's a gray market in it. And, you know, I was working with Jeffrey Sachs, which you should never do, at the Earth Institute. And he said, you know, I'm going to hold up $40 million to Musveni. And they said, dude, we move billions a year. You know, if $30 million is not going to make us have a conscience, you know, we won't take your money. We're taking everybody else's money. Don't worry about it. And so he didn't realize that showing clearly that they were wrong would not make them change their behavior at all, because the guy misread the power in the room. I mean, that's the problem with Jeffrey Sachs. He lives in this abstract world where he thought $30 million was going to make a billionaire grovel. So anyway, no, I believe in mapping. I think this really needs it.
And working with Uganda, I'm working with someone right now who they haven't had food. You know, aid was removed from President Trump. They haven't had food for 2.5 weeks. And they're like, they're not a resilient, self-efficient. And so all they need is used cooking oil to create soap so they can create hygiene and have the business angle that he's going on. But right now it's just like food. They don't have it. 2.5 weeks now. It's just really, it's saddening. So
I'd love to talk to you later in October when my conference is coming up like in 3 days about visualization for this project when I get back home. I think it's really important. Yeah, there's a lot of stories you can, because there's trails with markers and things here, right? I mean, so you could embed your content, you know, along this trail with this story. I mean, this is, you know, this trail is where the first massacre was, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of it. Yeah, because, you know, people are doing greenways. There's a lot of money for greenways, and the greenways get markers, and there's QR codes, et cetera. There's stories you could, you know, because the housing fund will be lower risk if we're more biodiverse. So, you know, that's people want to picture those two things together.
Thanks, guys. Gil.
Yeah, I love the conversation about mapping, both physical mapping and systems mapping and causal loops and all sorts of ways of helping people see and perceive the complexity they know. There's a guy named Scott Spann who's done remarkable work with multi-stakeholder community mapping, where a large group of people build the maps together. You know, there'll be a starting, maybe a starting point hypothetical map, and the question is, okay, what in your world are you not seeing on the wall? Put it on. And they keep doing that until it's a complete representation of all the stakeholders in the community. It's driven some remarkable projects of transformation. Kevin, I want to connect you up with him after the conference, perhaps. And I'd love to be in this conversation you guys are having. Back on the insurance, excuse me, back on the insurance theme. You know, we see this really starkly in the aftermath of the LA fires, where the state's response was, let's lighten the regulations so people can rebuild faster, rather than let's have regulations that has people,
I gotta go. Thanks, y'all.
Bye, Kevin. That encourages people to build buildings that are fire resilient. And we've all seen pictures of earthquakes where entire neighborhoods are flattened and one house is still standing. Or floods where somebody, you know, the community in Florida that survived the last round of hurricanes completely intact because of their land use planning, sponge land use, resilient buildings, and so forth. So there are ways at that. And there's an opportunity for insurance. The precedent was 100 and some odd years ago when Fireman's Fund, which was doing business safety insurance, started to provide free safety audits for the businesses they were insuring to come in and show them how to reduce their risk at no cost to the businesses, and, you know, crazy like a fox for Fireman's Fund because it meant less payouts for damage for them. And that's a model that has been, you know, mostly honored in the breach in the industry since then, but there's enormous opportunity for strategic insurance play. Joshua Harrison from the Center for the Study of the Force Majeure and I and our GPTs are working on some white papers on laying out a different kind of insurance, business-focused insurance industry strategy, whereby companies could do the kind of things we're talking about, rather than just saying, oh no, the calculations say we can't insure you, so we can write off entire states and screw you. Very different approach.
we're going at warp speed. We haven't even hit the hour yet. Why don't we slow down for a second and take a pause, and I'll bring us back in just a second. Just reflecting on I'm looking at the chat a little bit and this conversation, and I'm realizing that there seem to be, from my amateur perspective, many things we've created as policy, law, regulation that lead to scarcity or break abundance. One of those is zoning. One of those, for example, is we created wilderness areas and national parks where we drove people who understood how to manage the landscape off the land. We don't let people live in there, which I think is a mistake. And we're now in some places they're reconsidering the mistake and thinking, oh, maybe we should reverse track on that. But it's only a couple hundred years, it's 100 years plus too late on those things. But it seems like we make a lot of decisions that aren't based on rational systemic thinking. Then we bake those in as laws, and then we 50 years later go, gosh, that didn't turn out so well. And I don't like that we do that as societies. Klaus, please.
Yeah, the conversation just sparked something. We signed a contract with this group here, the Agro Regenerations, and they are headquartered in Kenya, in Nairobi. And the intention is to connect local farmers, groups of local farmers with resources that are available within the EU, mostly EU funded, but also within Africa. So they already have 40 locations mapped out in Indonesia, different African states, and a couple of Mediterranean countries. We're providing the AI intelligence technology embedded in their system, and I'm personally developing a strategic frame on how to engage. But the challenge here really is that it requires a change in behavior of subsistence farmers. We have to combine them, first of all, into groups, because a small farmer is just not cost effective to represent in any form or shape. So we are combining groups of farmers into like 100 of them. They are governed by elders. It's a non-hierarchical system. It's all circular management structures. And by combining them and then consolidating their behavior, meaning we are developing a regenerative practice that's the right one for their location and for their markets, meaning the types of crops they're growing, the methods they're using are going to be uniquely tailored to their particular location. We can then tokenize this, put it in contract forms, tokenize it, and then bring it back to the European Union agencies that are distributing these funds. So there's a pretty disciplined requirement for this entire contracting scheme and for the entire MRV. I mean, measurements, reporting, and values structure that goes with it. But I think the real challenge is that we are floating at the theoretical and policy level, with some great ideas, lots of money in there, but there is the vertical link missing. How do you operationalize this on the ground? So the AI system that we now have developed, now it's a 5-agent system that tracks the entire supply chain from farm to market. And then there is a 6th agent, is the enterprise agent, where we are customizing to a specific location to then know what is going on in these individual accounting groups. But that's really in general, it doesn't help to what USAID did, for example, is buy food from American farmers and put it into subsistence markets. That doesn't help, because the moment the food goes away, the whole system collapses, right? There was no attempt to assist these subsistence groups to become self-sufficient and to grow their own food. And so the emphasis is on, let's sell them GMO seeds, which is actually really what happened. Bill Gates all over the place, building synthetic nitrogen fertilizer plants in Africa. So the type of help that was given was really very selfish. I mean, it was not let's make these guys independent so they can live. So that's the overarching strategic intent that we have. Is to connect these available resources, with on the ground activity.
Thanks, Klaus. I've heard some much more positive stories about development aid, because there have been some thorough and eviscerating critiques of development aid. Hey, we ship food in and the local farmers can't make a living anymore, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that somewhere in some places, and I don't know who, but where, it's more nuanced than that. I mean, they have been trying to teach farmers to, bootstrap farmers to get back into business, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know that it's as vicious as it just sounded from what you just said.
It is as vicious as I was just saying.
Is it that bad?
It is horrible. I mean, they destroyed entire landscapes with GMO seeds and synthetic nitrogen. Inserting synthetic nitrogen into the arena was just, I mean, it's just criminal. And this is how, Bill Gates, and I don't submit bad intentions to someone like Bill Gates. He probably thought he's doing the right thing. He's actually embedded, he's a major investor in Monsanto. He's actually embedded with these groups on developing customized high-yield seeds and the chemical support structure. But it was just devastating. And you're dealing with completely uneducated subsistence farmers, and you don't have the extensions and all that support. So no, but Africa is absolutely waking up, to what happened to them and to make these changes. So we are actually partnered with the University of Nairobi extension to where they are guiding the process and providing us the credentials that we need in order to package this up the chain.
Thank you. Doug, please.
Muted.
Oh.
Just to augment the Bill Gates ironies. So his big thing were these nets, mosquito netting, in service to addressing the malaria problem. But as Klaus just mentioned, he's up to his neck in Monsanto. And a friend of mine, Bernie Krause, who was a ecological bioacoustician, pointed out that those chemicals are eradicating amphibians, frogs. Frogs eat mosquitoes. Like, if you want to go natural systems and you want to go regenerative and you want to go non-colonial, non-patriarchal, and non-capitalist, and actually speak to needs and problems. That is not what Bill Gates is in the business of doing, or any of them for that matter. The billionaires, are centered in their billions, are centered in capital, and everything they do is centered in capital and monopolization of, which now extends to food and GMO seed and all of it. I wanted to loop back around, but Pete, if you wanted to be on this subject, then I'll stop here and come back after you, because I wanted to loop back around to something that was raised.
Go ahead, Doug.
So somebody mentioned causal loop mapping, and so I'm at the genesis point, so this is really early, but some of you know Gene Bellinger, who's sort of, the GOAT of causal loop mapping and model making of very complex systems. And he did a class with causal loop mapping in AI. And he sort of developed, version 1 of an AI template to augment his causal loop mapping exercise. And it sort of caught my eye because causal loop mapping done properly, human mediated, this is not automating causal loops analysis, but it augmenting it with AI dramatically speeds it up, and also holds at the end of the process holds the promise of surfacing causes and things, variables that the person doing the mapping might have missed, but because of the volume of data and speed, it makes connections, right? So it can deepen the richness of the output. Well, in parallel to that, I've been working in folks who have frameworks addressing the soft stuff, which is the human, the emotional dimensions of people co-creating together, and also people engaged in dealing with crisis areas and challenges, global challenges. And so there's a possibility to stir into Gene's causal loop mapping is dealing with nouns. It's dealing with the physical world. It's dealing with, all of the mechanistic industrial revolution oriented ingredients of a system. But there's a guy named Bill Smith who has a framework called AIC, Appreciation, Influence, and Control, which is a rather elaborate framework, but applicable in a very systems-oriented way that speaks to purpose and power. So as an informing inquiry into guiding decision-making, factoring for those dimensions. So the balancing act between appreciation, which is sort of, the ideal and the goal, the source, the purpose end of it. And then control is the mechanics and the doing and the machinery and the infrastructure and the who, what, where, when, why. So I believe that framework could be integrated into Gene's mapping to factor for those dimensions. So that's piece number 2. Piece number 3 is somebody who we just lost, a guy named Barry Court. And Barry was unique. He was a systems guy. And one of his things was emotion in education. And he developed a framework for integrating the emotional dimensions, sort of enabling a valuing weighting of them as a variable framework plug-in within other analytical contexts. And I think that could also be integrated into this causal loop mapping. So now we're starting to actually 3-dimensionally, 4-dimensionally expand the nature of the inquiry and the analysis in looking at complex system dynamics and what's really going on. And then, clearly why, like what's all this about? So Donella Meadows, right, who's known for finding the concept of leverage points. So you have a causal loop map, like one of Gene's grandest was the Middle East, like 5,000 nodes. It was insane and magnificent. But like, what are the nodes that hold the potential for the most impact in terms of where do you target. And Donella Meadows sort of surfaced that concept of leverage points. So if we could do this richer mapping, factoring for the human and the being dimensions, and we can then identify leverage points, and we can have the output of that provide guidance and insight to inform and enable better decision making on a policy level, or on a financial and funding and resource level, or on a multi-stakeholder level, maximizing across all of those dimensions, start to have something. Now, with all of that said, enter yours truly. So to go to the metaphor of the still picture to motion pictures. So because of the speed and robustness of AI's capability as an enabling technology, not a source or driver, now take everything I just said and imagine that as a running process, with the variable inputs on the front end being real time. So it's an exponential leveling up of and creating a mechanism for a living real-time causal loop analysis, mapping, tracking of leverage points, tracking of changes. I think it's possible to build this. And I'm at the beginning, and I welcome anybody that wants to, sign on and help. Because I'm not Pete. Like, I wish I was you, Pete. I'm not you. Like, I'm technology-wise.
Alas, none of us is Pete. I don't know how that works. But
yeah, I'm a dilettante.
only Pete is Pete.
I'm a dilettante. I'm not like, I don't, I have a clear vision of the technologies involved in the pieces. I don't think it's that complicated in terms of anything needing to be invented. It's really about just pressing it all into place and service. But anyway, I really think we, if possible, it would be really great to level up the dimensionality of the inquiry and the analysis and orientation being brought to these contexts. So I want to end with the last punctuation mark, which is I'm working with a woman named Louise McCullough in Ireland, who's focused on survivors of domestic abuse, and a woman, 30-year-old young lawyer, brilliant woman in Nairobi, same territory, but supporting women coming out the back end in entrepreneurial endeavors and community level support and intermediating with other aid sources and all the rest. The woman in Nairobi, Tessie, shared a piece of a puzzle. So she has this nonprofit foundation. She's bootstrapped. She's helping women. She's engaged in rubber meets the road doing what she's doing. And a problem she shared was that based on the culture of corruption in Nairobi, that the women that she's training to be the care provider, benefits caseworker folk in her foundation to the women in the community, have so much distrust that in her offering to train them to serve the foundation, they want to know what's in it for her. Like, why is she offering them this for free? Like, why is she offering to train them? As like, there's nothing free. Like, where are the strings? And I raise that just because what it points to is the weak link is always in humans being human beings. The weak link is that people are people. They're not machinery. They're not parts of a machine. They're not cogs. And the soft dimensions, the cultural dimensions, the fear and belief and deprivation and trauma dimensions make or break it. And 85 to 90% of everything that exists today doesn't even acknowledge they exist, much less recognize that they're the leverage point. And I apologize for the length of that run, but I'm complete.
Excellent. Thanks, Doug. Got a lot of things in the room. Appreciate that. Pete.
That was great, Doug. No need for an apology. And hit me up about the causal loop real-time thingy. That sounds fun. Since we're on the topic of abundance and maybe in a way kind of the indigestion that comes seems to come from it, or lack of appropriate distribution or something. I wanted to make a shout out. I wish Ken were here to say this instead of me. I want to make a shout out to Hospicing Modernity, the book by Vanessa Andreotti. If you haven't seen it, she approaches the thing that we're in, the thing that we've built. She calls it the longer title, the longer name she's got for it is modernity/coloniality. She approaches modeling where we are and then what to think about it and what to do with that without paralysis in a way that is different from anything else I've seen. And so if you haven't seen it, I think you owe yourself a deep look at, the approach that she's got. And Ken doesn't have a lot of time in his life, I think, right now because he's starting to move. But Ken is kind of a central resource for me in finding out more about the book. And we've got some of us doing some inquiry about it, partly through Signal and other places. So that's kind of it.
Thank you very much. We're having abundant thoughts about abundance. Any other perspectives? You want to bring some other angle on the question in? I keep coming back to the notion that consumerism creates the illusion of abundance that has been entrancing for many people. There are amusing videos on YouTube of North Koreans or people who grew up in the Soviet Union coming to an American hypermarket or some other thing and just seeing how much stuff there is, how much stuff is available. I haven't been in a department store for a while, but last few times I went through like the women. I used to go shopping with my mom a bunch, and the women's clothing areas are just endless racks. And I look around, I'm like, wouldn't wear that, wouldn't wear that, wouldn't like to wear that. That looks ugly. Oh my God, what happened there? And just acres and acres and acres of stuff out, in the hope that somebody will pick it up and take it home and buy it with money. Stacy, please. Stacy, has your cynicism heightened or dampened a little bit with the call?
Well, that's actually what my comment's about. So I recognize that my cynicism may be a result that from an energetic point of view, I am actually where Trump began. I am at the heart of where he began, where consumerism is, where capitalism is. I'm in New York City. I know his type. I know the types of the people that surround him, probably more than most of you in this room. I also know types like you, but I grew up around the types of people that he grew up around on all different economic levels. So that could have a piece of it. Because as I've said many times, I can get into his mindset. The difference is I have a different morality and a different set of ethics, which, as we've noted many times, doesn't work as well to be successful in business. So now to get back to the trust piece of it and the leverage points, I've consistently, because I'm in the soft space, I'm working on building trust and building bridges. And that's where Romeo comes in. Romeo is the guy on my lap. Romeo came to me because last week in a NIAC space, a call came out, an urgent need for temporary foster care for this adorable little dog. And you guys know how much Marley meant to me. And people keep saying, are you going to get another dog? And as much as I loved Marley, I didn't want the responsibility. I'm loving my life. I'm out 5 nights a week. I'm on the music scene. I'm independent. I'm like a teenager. I like it. But I knew this dog was for me because nobody's going to take care of him better than I can. Well, here's the story of Romeo. Romeo's father was picked up by ICE as he was dropping his kids off at camp. And because he was the sole provider, his wife and children no longer have a home. So until they can find their home that accepts dogs, I'm taking care of Romeo. Now, in my town, me and Romeo go out and meet people the way me and Marley used to meet people. And he's become the ambassador. So I make sure, because I can usually get a sense of where somebody is in their heart space, let's say. And so people that may not have had compassion or empathy for Romeo's family have total compassion for Romeo. They also get a different way of looking at the situation. So, I mean, you might find it amusing if you know who Curtis Sliwa is. I call him a misogynist, 4-time married vigilante liar, but that's just me. But he's now campaigning for animal rights, which confirms to me what I already knew, that these people actually love animals, or many of them, at least the ones that crisscross do. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make, what was the point? Is this is Romeo, and he's going to be with me for a while, and hopefully I'll take some time to write something up on Facebook, because that's the world I play in. So Gil, to your point, those people know me. I've been speaking there for 10 years, and whether they like me or hate me, for the most part, the people that know me, they know that what I'm saying is me. I am true to my character. So whether you like my character or you hate my character, you can trust my character. So for me, it's a matter of trust. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacey. Alex.
I'm going to move slightly away from everything you've said. So, Jess, if you're still on track with this path, would you like to speak first rather than me kind of derailing the conversation somewhere?
No, I wanted to kind of more converge everyone together, so I will go more at the end. Thank
Okay,
you.
let me scatter them then in the first place.
Go on.
It's very interesting what you've said, and for me, for my mind, the way my mind works, it's all very interesting. And the thing that I always think about, though, I live in a world of my mental picture of the world, I should say, is one of special interests doing their thing. Biggest special interest is, of course, capitalism, and it pushes and drives in a way that says abundance is a lot of everything that, as a lot of you have said, is not really needed. And trying to convince people to step back, even if you try and convince 5 people to step back, there's another million over there doing whatever we don't want them to do because it's wasting resources, etc. And I just wonder, the way you think, it's actually a question for you guys, is we're talking about it, we're saying the right things and believe the right things, but how are we going to change anything other than talking about the right things? You know, it's sort of, there's too few of us, there's too few across the world. And this is a systemic thing. That's what I always keep going on about this. The systemic things are pushing in. And, you know, at the back of my mind, I think if you take the Amish as a subculture, or what, sorry, if I use the wrong word, I apologize, whatever they are. And then, but there's a few of those sort of communities that are living on the benefit of everybody else accepting them, that they are as they are, but they're being nurtured in a way. And that's not how the real world works. And how are we going to change that without being dictatorial about it? It's just your thoughts. I don't think we're going to change it, but anybody have any?
Thanks, Alex. if you have suggestions or answers for Alex, climb in the queue, please. Let's go to Jesse.
Great question. I think we're asking that every day of ourselves. And in order to unify and be the change I wish to see in this call, in this community of Jerry's and all us, I have continuously tried to map the intelligence in this room. It's incredible. We have 9 people on the OGM room. Stacy doesn't really, she wanted to have a virtual room that's open 24/7. I created that. It's available, Stacy. Let's connect.
I don't want a virtual room though. I'm sorry.
Well, this is a virtual room, you and me right here in this call. And so I would love to create conversation because I believe that answer that you just raised is born out of community. And it depends on which community you're in. So if you're in a local-based community, that answer is different than if you're in an OGM community. So depending on who you're with, that answer emerges. So I loved the prompt at the beginning of this call. And the questions were answered based on different life stages, different consciousness levels, different needs. And we're just kind of resonating with the world as we all have different perspectives and different needs. But if we wanted to start honing in and converging at least just this community and see where those touch points are, and as Doug was bringing up, let's go. I am ready to soar here because talking is one thing and converging and acting is another. So I'll put in the link again. And Stacy, you and I, let's talk afterwards and figure out what would work for you because I want to serve you and how you are amazing in community. And I want your inspiration to be a seed.
Thank you. Can I just respond to that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, let me explain. This community has served me. This is the virtual world. So Jesse, what you created, that's to serve others. I already like it's almost like going back. What you're doing and what I hope I inspired you to create is deconstructing what I already lived into, if that makes sense. So I don't want to go and find a new virtual world to play in. I'm actually leaving the virtual world. I spent yesterday with Romeo sitting outside the club that I usually go to, talking to people. Somebody sat and was telling me about his memories coming up about 9/11. Somebody who's more towards the right. And I got to sit with them and talk to them and be in the world.
Yeah.
So my journey is a little different. I am different. So I don't want you to take it the wrong way. I'm unique, but I love that virtual world. But this was it for me.
Stacy, we're actually talking about the same thing because I'm trying to get people off the virtual world into their community, into their place-based. So I'm going to put this link in here. Based on Dunbar research, it shows that we only need about 50 people in our lives that we are committed to, and they're committed to us. I mean, they're committed to us, and there's reciprocation. And if that is there in a place-based or digital, you decide, we can thrive. It shows based on research, we can thrive in smaller communities. And so let's talk about that a little bit more, but it's all about getting back into our community. If it's place-based, yes, for sure.
What I would just say is find the people first.
Yes.
And then use those spaces to coordinate. But
yes.
Find the people that you want to spend time with. That's the key that you want to be with.
That's the link I just put in there. So thank you. And 42 is the meaning of life. So that's why 42.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you both. Before going to Klaus, I just want to ask us to use the chat to answer Jesse's challenge. It's like, hey, what kinds of things might we engage in together that would be juicy for you? That we, the people in this group listening to this call right this second, this we, the very, very local we. And one thing I'm interested in is doing something provocative to tease, cajole, poke, provoke the insurance companies. Like I'm like, little tired of them not stepping up and helping change the world, shape the world for the good in some way. And I would love to do something provocative for the insurance companies. So ping me if you'd like to play with that together, and maybe there's something there. But I bet there's a bunch of other things that have been in our minds that if we share them into the chat, we might find 2-3 people who want to get together and do things and then go off and do them, which would be great. And if you do any of that, come back and tell us about it later. Klaus, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, along the same lines as Jesse was just outlining, and Stacy, I like the neighborhoods of sanity concept. What is really happening in the regenerative movement right now? It is a concept someone else described as islands of coherence. So the realization that we can't spread lateral, and boil the ocean, so to speak. You have to take one community at a time. And the reason why that is so important is because we are on the one hand talking at the narrative level, right? Storylines. And so we are creating stories of change, of transition. But then Donald Meadows comes to mind, right? The pyramid of a system where, yes, you have the narrative level that really condenses the story, but then that same narrative has to stay intact as it rolls down the pyramid, or I really call it an inverted pyramid, right? Because the narrative is at the base and it's holding up the entire pyramid. So as you go through those layers, through the administrative part, the operational part, that story has to stay intact and motivate and direct, the action of people in that community. So that really takes, a transition. It takes a convergence, of many different layers there. And so I'm working with spiral dynamics. So when we go into the base layers of this pyramid, that's when you are operating in blue, right? People who are in like Mike Johnson is the epitome of blue, the Speaker of the House. So that's a different language, and that language has been evolving over 2,000 years. That's New Testament language that gets you into the hearts and minds of people who are operating in that layer. So we shouldn't hesitate, because it's religion and all this stuff. We shouldn't hesitate to use that language in order to reach out, because that's the world that this group has been embedded in and grew up in, through Sunday school and Bible studies and all of this stuff. That's the language they understand. So we have metaphors that are instantly recognizable and resonate. And I think there is this. This translation where there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions of, I can't use this is childish, or this is whatever. No, this is the language of people you're trying to reach. And so why not use it to its fullest? And there is a hunger right now. You can see in the pop, you can see these often misguided attempts to bring religion into the conversation, but in the way it's done, it's more exploitative than supportive. So there are pockets of like this one congressperson in Texas who is a pastor, wonderfully articulate, and he is unafraid and unintimidated to use biblical language to address his voters. And so that's I think we have to change minds, we have to change narratives. We have to change stories. And we are pretty much consolidated on the story we have at the top. I mean, amongst ourselves here, You know, the story is pretty clear, what it should be, where we should be going, and so on. That this is not the challenge. The challenge is to translate this story, right? So it echoes in the different layers of this pyramid in each phase of them. Sorry, didn't mean to preach.
That's all right. Thanks, Klaus. I just noticed we're coming up on the end of our time. Klaus, you may have the last word. We have no Circa and Homer with us today, but I think I've found a poem that I would like to read in as our close. So Gil, off to you.
Sorry, I thought you were giving Klaus the last word. Just very briefly, Klaus, I appreciate very much what you're saying, and I want to just flag a contradiction in what I heard of what you're saying, which is about understanding people's language and speaking to them in that, but that can be manipulative, you said, I think, and exploitative. So there's a challenge there of how to do that centers the listening more than the speaking. Like, how do I engage with somebody who's in a very different language and worldview than me so that we can understand each other, different than me learning how to use their language so I can get them to do what they want? Because that sort of recapitulates the same problem. So, and it's a delicate dance to do that. But I think that's what you're pointing to, and you flag the contradiction. I just wanted to highlight that you know, I heard a quote somewhere. I thought it was attributed to Gandhi, but I can't find it anywhere. But somebody once told me that all persuasion is violence. And it's, it's an extreme statement. It's provocative, but there's something for me very generative in thinking into that. How do I meet minds with other people and find better common purpose together without trying to bend them to my will?
Yeah,
The
no,
best
absolutely. Listening. 2 ears,
Sorry.
1 mouth, right?
Jerry, thank you.
You mentioned, I think you brought this up on the call of 8/28, and I looked it up, and the closest I got was Sally Miller Gearhart.
Close enough for me. I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was my best tracking. Pete can probably do better than me on this, but just saying, I'm just a yellow belt on this. Stacy, you're gonna have a last word,
I'm
which
sorry.
seems somehow appropriate because you had the opening salvo too.
I know you wanted, I just think this is an appropriate story for this last interaction. So in a conversation with my mother, who voted for Trump 3 times, she's very old, she's old, we're going through our last things. She was very upset. I'm trying to calm her down. I don't want to fight with her. Now, I'm Jewish. We had no religious training. I'm actually the only one that ever, my father was bar mitzvahed because his family, did that. They were Democrats. They had Kennedy in their house. My mother's right. She was all Uncle Sam. So she's talking to me. She sounds like an evangelical. She's always talking about the Lord, the Lord, the Lord. So she was worried about something. So I said, Mom, let's pray together. So, but I prayed to her and I was calling in Gaia. And anyway, she got very upset with me. And I forgot why I brought up this story, but it had to do with the language. Oh, and that's what it was. It was the delicate dance. Because even though I was using what she kept saying about prayer and how important prayer was, now I was willing to pray with her. And I said, call upon grandma, and and she believes in that too. She really does. But it was just very interesting because when I wasn't going in the direction she wanted, she got very, very angry. And that's what happens when you use somebody's own language. And we saw that with Charlie Kirk. When people used his own words, people can get really angry. So it is a delicate dance because when you're dealing at a certain level of purposely trying to not be aware, all the emotions come out to push you away. So this wasn't the most articulate way to explain it, but it's a starting point for another conversation.
Thank you, Stacy. And you're reminding me, a belated Shana Tova to those who celebrate. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thanks. Doug, thank you very much. The poem that I will now read is by Czesław Miłosz. I think that's how to pronounce his name. It's titled Love. And it goes as follows. Love means to learn to look at yourself the way one looks at distant things. For you are only one thing among many. And whoever sees that way heals his heart without knowing it from various ills. A bird and a tree say hi to him, friend. Then he wants to use himself and things so that they stand in the glow of ripeness. It doesn't matter whether he knows what he serves. Who serves best doesn't always understand.
Hmm. Can you read it again, Jerry?
Sure. Love means to learn to look at yourself the way one looks at distant things. For you are only one thing among many. And whoever sees that way heals his heart without knowing it from various ills. A bird and a tree say to him, friend. Then he wants to use himself and things so that they stand in the glow of ripeness. It doesn't matter whether he knows what he serves. Who serves best doesn't always understand.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Can you give us a link?
It's in the chat already.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
You.
Thanks for a wonderful conversation. Really appreciate this. And the way we all approach these kinds of conversations makes my heart sing. So thank you very much. Thanks all.
Thank you.